When Hollywood's most acclaimed actress walked into the View studio in her signature, elegant blouse and tailored trousers, nobody imagined the poise she wore would fade into the kind of icy stare that would stop even Whoopi Goldberg mid-sentence. What began as a lighthearted interview quickly devolved into a live television moment so tense the audience forgot to clap. You're about to see how a woman who built her career on integrity and intelligence found herself facing a storm of insults, and how one cruel remark about her public advocacy made her walk off the View for good. The morning at ABC Studios had been bright, crisp, and buzzing with excitement. Emma Watson arrived early, as she always did, exuding a quiet confidence. Wearing a simple but sharp ensemble, her trademark elegant blouse paired with tailored trousers. She exuded warmth, shaking hands with crew members, smiling at makeup artists, even signing an autograph for a young stagehand who whispered, "You're my hero." In the green room, she sipped herbal tea while her publicist went over talking points for her new thought-provoking independent film. As usual, she nodded politely, listening but didn't seem nervous. She had done hundreds of interviews. Hell, she'd done thousands since her Harry Potter days, and she prided herself on staying composed. Whoopi Goldberg, however, had been pacing on set before the cameras rolled. Her co-hosts, Sunny, Anna, and Sarah, looked mildly concerned as she muttered to herself, flipping through her notes. "If no one else is going to say it, I will," she was overheard saying. When Emma finally walked out, the studio erupted. Cheers, whistles, and applause filled the room as she flashed her megawatt smile, hugging Anna, shaking hands with Sarah, and exchanging kind words with Sunny. But when she turned to Whoopi, she offered only a curt nod and a faint smirk. "Welcome back to the View, Emma," she said flatly, as though reading from a teleprompter. "Thanks for having me, Whoopi," she replied warmly, undeterred. The first few minutes were what everyone expected. Banter about her movie, her humanitarian work, a funny anecdote about her book club and her cat. The crowd laughed. The hosts giggled. Even Whoopi cracked a faint smile at one point, though her eyes were sharp, calculating. Then it was Whoopi's turn to ask a question. She leaned forward, lowering her voice for effect. "Emma," she began, "you've been very successful at selling yourself as this wholesome, hard-working advocate for change. But don't you think it's a little dishonest? You're a child star turned UN ambassador. You're not really a professional diplomat. Do you honestly think you belong in the same conversation as Nobel laureates or world leaders?" The question landed like a hammer. The audience gasped. The other hosts froze. Emma's smile faltered for a millisecond before returning. Softer now, her jaw tightening slightly. "I think everyone has their own path." "Whoopi," she said calmly, "I've never claimed to be a Nobel laureate or a world leader, but I work hard. I care about the craft, and audiences seem to appreciate that." But Whoopi wasn't done. She raised an eyebrow and smirked. "Care about the craft or care about the paycheck? You've made what? Hundreds of millions of dollars playing a magical teen in every movie? You ever think about giving someone with real talent a shot instead?" A murmur went through the studio. Emma's hands rested on her lap, fingers steepled, her knuckles white. Her gaze never left hers. "With all due respect," she said evenly, "I take nothing for granted. I've worked since I was 9, giving up a normal childhood for 12-hour days on set for my craft. If that offends you, well, I can't help that." For a moment, Whoopi sat back, her smile almost triumphant, as though she believed she had struck a nerve. The audience, however, had grown uneasy. The energy in the room had shifted. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was something else, and it was only the beginning. The tension in the studio had grown thick enough to slice through. Emma Watson adjusted slightly in her chair, her fingers curling against the armrests, while Whoopi flipped her note cards with an almost theatrical flair. The audience shifted uneasily, sensing that the usual playful banter had given way to something darker. A clash of personalities, neither willing to back down from. Sunny tried to lighten the mood. "Emma," she interjected gently, "tell us about that hilarious scene from your movie. You actually debated a robot on screen." Emma smiled faintly at her, grateful for the save, and began describing the sequence. But she barely got 2 sentences in before Whoopi cut her off. Right," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "We've all seen the trailer, Emma. Book smarts, big words, fancy speeches. My question is, do you actually think that's acting?" A few awkward chuckles rippled through the crowd, but they quickly quieted when they realized she wasn't joking. Emma turned to her slowly, her voice even. I think moving people, making them forget their problems for 2 hours. That's a form of acting, yes. Whoopi leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Or maybe it's just spouting lines in front of a camera and letting your reputation do the rest. The jab stung more than Emma let on, though her expression didn't falter. She gave a short, sharp laugh, shaking her head just slightly. Well, Whoopi, I'd invite you on set to see how much research it takes to haul myself out of bed at 4 a.m. to get into character or to rehearse a challenging scene for 12 hours straight. It's not as easy as it looks, but I respect your opinion. Ana Navarro finally jumped in. Come on, Whoopi. Don't you think you're being a little hard on her? She's built an incredible career. People love her. But Whoopi shot her a look that silenced her instantly. Oh, I'm just getting started, Whoopi said dryly. Let's talk about your so-called career, Emma. Do you ever think about how many real actresses you've pushed out of roles because producers know your name sells tickets? Don't you think it's unfair that you've taken up space that serious actors have worked their whole lives for? The crowd gasped audibly this time. Emma's jaw set, her hand curled into a fist in her lap before she forced it open again. With respect, Whoopi, I've never taken anything I didn't earn. And if producers believe I bring a value to a project, that's their choice. I can't apologize for working hard and delivering results. Whoopi chuckled under her breath, shaking her head. Delivering results? She repeated mockingly. You mean playing the same smart girl in every movie? The charming intellectual who beats people with her words. Congratulations, Emma. You've perfected the art of being yourself. The other hosts exchanged worried glances. Even the camera operators seemed to pause, unsure where to focus their lenses as the confrontation escalated. The audience, sensing history in the making, sat dead silent. Whoopi leaned back in her murmur, arms crossed as if she had already won. You know what really bothers me, she continued. You sit here flashing that smile, selling your little fairy tale of wit and determination to people who don't know any better. You make them believe that they can be you if they just work hard enough. That's dangerous. That's a lie. Emma finally spoke, her voice lower now, but sharper. It's not a lie to tell people they can better themselves, Whoopi. It's not a lie to tell people to work hard and believe in themselves. What's dangerous is telling people they're doomed before they even try. That's cruel. That last word hung in the air like a challenge. Whoopi straightened in her up by her expression icy. Oh, please. You sit in your mansion with your millions and your personal chefs and your private jets, and you dare talk about struggle. You're a brand, Emma, not a person. And brands don't care about people. They care about profit. So spare me the humble routine. We all know what you really are. For the first time, Emma's smile completely vanished. And what exactly am I, Whoopi? She asked, her voice a low growl. Whoopi didn't hesitate. You're a fraud, a walking billboard, a woman who spent so much time playing the hero that you've forgotten what it means to actually be one. There it was, the word that finally sliced through Emma's composure like a blade. Fraud. For the first time, she leaned forward slightly, her shoulders squaring off toward her. I've fought every day of my life for everything I've built, she said, each word deliberate. If you think that makes me a fraud, then maybe you should take a long, hard look at what you consider authentic. The room went completely still. The lights above seemed suddenly harsher. And yet, somehow, everyone in the studio knew they hadn't even reached the climax of this storm because there was still one line left for Whoopi to cross. The air in the studio had shifted from tense to suffocating. Every eye was fixed on Emma and Whoopi as they sat just a few feet apart, locked in a verbal duel that felt like it might boil over into something even more unpredictable. The audience was dead quiet, leaning forward in their seats, hanging on every word. Even the other hosts, Anna, Sunny, and Sarah, sat frozen, unwilling to step between the two titans, now facing off under the harsh studio lights. Emma adjusted her tailored trousers over her blouse, sitting back slightly as if trying to reclaim her composure. She ran her fingers along the edge of the table, then spoke with measured calm. You know, Whoopi, it's fine to not like me. It's fine to think I'm not talented, But at least don't stand here and pretend that what you're doing is anything other than trying to tear somebody else down to make yourself feel bigger. Whoopi smirked at her unbothered. Oh, Emma, don't flatter yourself. I'm not threatened by you. I'm just tired of people like you. People who get celebrated for showing up while the rest of us have to actually work. Her words were laced with venom now. Emma tilted her head, her voice cool. I've been working since I was 9, Whoopi. Nothing I have was handed to me and thought, I'm sorry if that doesn't fit the narrative you have built in your head. Whoopi's hands clutched her cards a little tighter, but her voice stayed sharp. Working, please. You were handed a platform because you could memorize lines and be a cute kid for the camera. That's not work. That's a circus act. A faint murmur passed through the audience at the jab. Emma's jaw clenched as she tried visibly to let the comment slide, but it was getting harder. You don't have to respect child actors, she said quietly, but you don't get to erase the thousands of people who looked up to me because they finally saw someone who fought her way out of nothing and made something of herself. Whoopi waved her hand dismissively. Yeah, the poor kid made good. We've heard it before, but don't come on my show and preach like you're some kind of saint. You've made millions playing the same smart girl over and over. Where's the art in that? This time the audience gasped audibly. Emma straightened her back, her eyes narrowing slightly as she replied, maybe the art is in showing people that no matter where they come from, they can be something more. Maybe the art is in making people feel hope when the world gives them none. Or maybe you're just too bitter to see it anymore. That one landed. Whoopi's expression hardened, her lips thinning. She leaned forward, her voice low but cutting. You know what I think, Emma? I think you fooled everyone. I think you fooled yourself. You're not a role model, Mamachin. You're just another overpaid intellectual selling empty slogans to desperate people who don't know any better. Even Anna and Sarah flinched at that, but it was when she dropped the next line that everything changed. You know, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, I even wonder if you're a good representative for those young girls you keep championing on social media. Because from what I can see, you're too busy playing superstar to actually be there for them. The words cut through the air like a blade. Emma froze, her smile gone completely now, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Her hands resting on the table tightened. The muscle in her jaw twitched. The entire audience gasped. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. Even Whoopi's fellow hosts shot her alarm glances, as if realizing she had crossed a line she could never uncross. Emma's voice when it came was low, steady, and carried more menace than anything she'd said before. Don't you dare bring my advocacy into this, she said, each word deliberate, her chest rising and falling with controlled fury. Whoopi tried to wave it off, but the damage was done. Oh, please, she said flippantly, though her voice wavered slightly now. I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. Emma stood, and when she stood, she towered over the table, her presence swallowing the entire set. The tailored trousers hung perfectly as she leveled her gaze at Whoopi, who now sat stiffly in her chair, suddenly looking smaller under her shadow. You can question my talent. You can insult my work. You can take shots out of my story, but you do not question my purpose as a woman. You do not talk about my work with girls, ever. The words echoed in the silent studio. Even the camera seemed to hesitate before zooming in on her face, stone unyielding, and utterly done with the charade. The audience sat frozen, holding their breath, unsure of what would happen next. And without another word, Emma began unfastening her microphone. The tension was so thick, even the crew had stopped moving. The only sound was the faint scrape of her chair as she stepped back from the table. Whoopi opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to walk it back, perhaps to double down, but Emma cut her off with a single sharp look. She handed her mic to the nearest producer and adjusted her jacket. Then she turned to Whoopi one last time, her voice low and steady. You've said more about yours in the last 20 minutes than you've said about me, and none of it's good. I hope someday you figure that out. And then, with the eyes of the nation on her, she began walking toward the exit, leaving the studio stunned and silent behind her. The only sound was her measured footsteps fading into the distance. The studio doors closed behind Emma Watson with a muted click, but the weight of her presence lingered long after she was gone. The audience sat frozen, their applause from earlier a distant memory now replaced with hushed whispers and stolen glances at one another. Whoopi Goldberg stayed in her chair, her eyes fixed on the table, her hands still clutching her question cards. For the first time during the entire ordeal, she looked small. The self-assured smirk that usually adorned her face was gone, replaced by something harder to read, perhaps even regret. The other hosts exchanged awkward glances. Anna Navarro cleared her throat as if to speak, but stopped when she caught the expression on Whoopi's face. Sarah Haynes busied herself shuffling papers that didn't need shuffling, her cheeks flushed pink. Even the studio crew, usually invisible professionals, stood frozen in place. Whoopi finally looked up, her eyes meeting those of the audience. There was no applause, no murmured support, only the sound of one woman in the back quietly whispering. That was too far. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. "Well," she said, her voice uncharacteristically shaky, "I suppose we'll take a quick break." But no one moved to cut to commercial. In the control room, the producers were frantically trying to figure out what to do next. On social media, clips of the heated exchange were already being uploaded and shared at lightning speed. Hashtags like #Emma walks out and #Whoopi crosses the line began trending before Emma even reached her car. In the hallway outside the studio, Emma stood alone for a moment, leaning against the wall. Her composed frame still emanated quiet fury, but her breathing was steady now. A production assistant approached timidly with her coat, and she took it with a polite nod. "Thanks," she muttered, pulling it on over her tailored trousers and elegant blouse. Her publicist caught up to her just as she reached the elevator. "Emma, wait. Maybe we can—" He stopped her with a raised hand. "No," she said firmly, her voice low but calm now. "We're done here. There's nothing left to fix." The elevator door slid open and she stepped inside without another word. Back in the studio, Whoopi attempted to regain control of the situation. "Well," she began again, forcing a laugh that rang hollow in the silence. "You know, things can get a little heated around here sometimes." But the audience didn't respond. Anna finally spoke, her voice hesitant but clear. "Whoopi, I think that crossed a line." Even Sarah nodded reluctantly. Whoopi's eyes darted between her colleagues, her jaw tightening as if to defend herself. But the words caught in her throat. Instead, she stared down at her notes, silently, willing the segment to end. When the show finally cut to commercial, the studio erupted into quiet chaos. Crew members scrambled to reset. The hosts whispered furiously among themselves, and the audience remained seated, unsure whether to clap or simply leave. Outside, Emma stepped into a waiting black SUV. As the door closed behind her, she pulled out her phone and opened Instagram. For a long moment, she stared at the blank screen. Then she typed a single message, posted it, and set the phone down on the seat beside her. Lesson of the day: always stand tall, even when others try to tear you down, especially then. Within seconds, thousands of likes and comments poured in supporting her, praising her for her dignity, her composure, and for walking away before saying something she'd regret. Meanwhile, back at the studio, Whoopi sat silently in her chair as the next guest was ushered in. The energy in the room had shifted irreversibly. Even she could feel it. She straightened her stack of cards, but her hands were trembling slightly now. She glanced once more toward the doors where Emma had exited and muttered under her breath, "Too quiet for anyone else to hear. Maybe I went too far." The segment wrapped up without incident, but it was clear to everyone, the co-hosts, the crew, the audience, that nothing would erase what had just happened. Later that evening, headlines blazed across every major outlet. Emma Watson walks out on The View after heated clash with Whoopi Goldberg. "Don't you dare talk about my advocacy." Emma's explosive exit from The View. Whoopi faces backlash over harsh interview with Emma Watson. Clips of the confrontation flooded timelines and news feeds, sparking debate and igniting conversations about professionalism, respect, and boundaries. Emma never responded publicly again. She didn't need to. The world had seen enough. And as the dust settled, one thing was clear. She may have walked out of that studio, but she walked out with her head held high while Whoopi was left to pick up the pieces of a moment that she couldn't undo. If you thought the story was as intense as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel, Celeb Courage Chronicles, for more dramatic, unforgettable moments from behind the scenes of Hollywood. Let us know in the comments. Was Emma right to walk out, or did Whoopi just do her job? Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all.